Mahu, it actually snowed here yesterday in mid-April, which is a little bit late for us, but you just never know this time of year. So excited to be here with you guys to talk a little bit more about negotiation and asking for what you want in your career. I think it's such an important topic. And so we're going to have some interaction throughout this where I'll ask some questions and you can answer via chat. And then I'll present some content as well, and we'll have time at the end for questions. And I'll give us a short overview of the agenda of where we're going today after we get started here in a minute with just a few questions. So what I would love to hear about first is, why is this topic important to you? This topic of negotiation. Why is this important to you? And you can go ahead and put your answer in the chat. And we will just read some of them out, not necessarily all of them, depending on how many people respond. I don't know that we'll get to them all, but you can go ahead and start putting your answers in chat. And Mahua, I'm wondering if you might be able to help out and read.
Yes.
For some reason, the chat panel, I think, won't open for me since I've shared my screen.
Sure. I will lead them. So we already received 3 responses. So Savita says, to understand and get the best value for myself. Meenakshi's response is because she's a new solopreneur. So it's very important for her to understand this topic. Ritika says, I want to learn how can we negotiate what I deserve. Ranjana's point is to live a life of purpose. Shruti says to get to what I want the way I want and get what I deserve. Divya's point is to position oneself with confidence and strengthen my value proposition. And BG's point is, I want to move up and just not wait for someone to give me that opportunity. Lovely points coming up. Yamini's statement is to contribute significantly to my success. Did you get all? Yeah.
Perfect. Those are great responses. Thank you so much. That helps me to gauge where the group is at today. And those are some really important points that everybody brought up so far. And I think a lot of times, you know, as women, sometimes confidence is a barrier for us with negotiation. So that can be a big one. And somebody mentioned about really moving up and not waiting for the opportunity. And so that was part of my title, is kind of taking control, because I think a lot of times you have to ask for what you want. It's not going to just fall on your doorstep. You need to go ahead and ask for what you want in your career and negotiate that. So my next question is around, what are your biggest challenges to negotiating successfully? And again, you can put that in the chat. And thank you for your help, Mahua, in reading those. I don't know why I can't access the chat with the slides, but I appreciate your help.
Sure. So yeah, what are your biggest challenges to negotiating successfully? I think we, okay, so I think Durga's response is okay. Ritika says confidence, if what I am asking is right or not. So what is the possibility? Whatever I'm asking, is it making sense or not? Tanisha's point is, I think that I underestimate what I deserve. Pratibha says lack of personal branding skills. I think lack of confidence is coming multiple times. Shruti, Swapna. Sanmeet says sometimes negotiating feels like bragging. So what is that balance between bragging and negotiating? Meenakshi's point is not knowing the market price for my services. So I think her point is from a solopreneur, you know, how do you negotiate and ensure you get clients? Yamini's point is consciousness of, you know, are you doing things right? Savita says knowledge of what the value. I think so. Common points are, you know, knowing the value, what value to ask for. Second is lack of confidence to even be confident of what we are asking. And I think Beula's point is negotiating with senior leaders is always a challenge for her. So I think that's the topic that we are getting into. Getting resistance from the other side. Yes, while you're negotiating, many a times you get resistance. So how do you counter react that? Shrija's point is, I feel at times I'm not confident in asking. So again, confidence. Um, then a self-doubt, right? Shravia's point, am I equally competent? And can I spend the same work time as any other man? So difference between, the roles man and woman plays, and will be able to justify our role? Communicating it through worth. So how do you communicate your worth? Jill's point is how to make sure it's a win-win. Yeah. So yeah, the main point of negotiation is the partner. So how do you make a win-win situation for both and not leaving anything on the table? Malika's point is lack of picking up the right way. Ranjana's point, and the last one is smoke screen objections from the other side. Yeah, again, resistance. So common themes, Christine: resistance, lack of confidence, and how do I know what my worth is so that I can negotiate well? Yeah, so, and the fourth is market value. So I think these are the common themes.
Okay, great. Thank you all so much for the feedback. I appreciate it. So this presentation should hit on a lot of those themes today. And I will add in some extra feedback around that. And if I don't cover anything fully at the end, you can ask me in the question section too. So just a little bit about me. Mahua gave a great introduction earlier. As she mentioned, I'm in the United States in Ohio. I'm a career coach and I have my own business in coaching. And I'm really passionate about helping people reach their career goals because I feel like you are spending a lot of time in your career, you're spending a lot of time at work, and you should be happy and passionate about what you're doing. And negotiation is definitely a topic that comes up a lot with my clients, and that I have seen the difference it's made for them and for me in my own life. Negotiated multiple things throughout my career. And I think negotiation is a skill. We use it a lot in our personal lives too, right? If anyone has children, there's a lot of negotiation that often happens there. I have young children, so negotiate a lot with them on certain things. But we are negotiating every day in a lot of different ways, and sometimes we don't always think of it that way. And then when we go to use that skill professionally, it can feel a little bit more intimidating around the confidence or knowing your worth piece or those types of things. But I invite you to think about that as we go along today, that you're probably already using a lot of negotiation skills already in your everyday life, even if it may be in a bit more of a personal setting. So what I know for sure through my years of experience is that anyone can get what they want in their career. And to get those results, you must be able to ask for it. As somebody mentioned earlier, not just waiting for that opportunity, but really being able to ask for what you want in your career and advocate for yourself is very important to help meet your career goals. And when you have a structure for negotiating, taking your control of your career can be very rewarding and not feel so intimidating or nervous for people. And so out of my years of experience, this is a model that I developed that I work on with clients, just to give you a brief overview of that. So we start more with a strength-based approach, which Mahua mentioned at the beginning, and then really discovering, what are best fit opportunities for them based on their career goals and what they need coaching around, helping them enhance their messaging, implementing an action plan, and then assessing and adjusting along the way. So negotiation gets a little bit more to the action plan piece of this and the messaging piece as well, because that's obviously a big piece of it. So what we're going to cover today are 3 different things, which was mentioned in the description for this webinar ahead of time. So the first thing is the number 1 thing you must do to get what you want in your career. Getting clear on how to get on track with your career goals. And customizing your approach to negotiations, you always feel confident to ask for what you want. So the first 2 pieces, we're going to do a little bit more thinking and sharing about what we want in our career. And then the last piece is where we're going to cover a lot more content and some of those strategies related to really being able to successfully negotiate. So we're going to jump right into the first point, which is the number 1 thing you must do to get what you want in your career. And that is define what you want. So that sounds easy, right? That's the number 1 thing you need to do is define what you want, but that's not always very easy to define what you actually want and to be specific about it. Because a lot of times this is a big question for people and they aren't always sure what they want. Sometimes I work with clients that aren't sure, which is fine. And so that's part of the process we work through. And for those of you that know what you want, sometimes it's a matter of being specific. So, you know, maybe you talk about wanting more responsibility in your company, but what does that actually look like for you? Or maybe you want to be making a higher salary, but how much more are you looking to make? Or maybe you want a different work schedule, or you would like to be able to lead a project, you know. So there's lots of different examples around negotiation. Are we really being specific on what we want in our career so that we can get there more effectively? And so that's what I've really found is the key for people, is being able to define very specifically what you want would be helpful to you in order to move forward and really reach your career goals. As I mentioned, you may not know, and the process may take some time. So a recent example, I'll give you guys a few client examples throughout the presentation to help really bring things to life here. But I have worked with a client who had been in her company for a number of years, and she was just kind of feeling stuck where she was at. Kind of felt like she had, you know, reached a plateau in her company and in her career path there. And wasn't sure what the path may be for her moving forward there. She wasn't sure exactly what she wanted to do moving forward. So our coaching together focused more on clarity for her to help her really define this and what she wanted to do moving forward. The second point is about getting clear on how to get on track with your career goals. So I'm going to ask you guys some questions related to this. And if you aren't clear, this should help bring some clarity to you. If you are clear, this should help provide some of that further detail I mentioned earlier about really being specific as to what you would like. So these are the questions I would like you to take just a minute or two to think about. What makes me most excited about my current role? What is the one thing I would most like to change about my current role? And then based on that, what is one thing you want to negotiate? What's one thing you would like to negotiate moving forward in your career? So I'm going to give you guys just a minute or two to think about that. If you have a pen and paper with you or you're at your computer, you can write those down. And then I'll invite you in just a minute to share some feedback in the chat window. Okay, so as people start to determine one thing you would like to negotiate, you can go ahead and share in the chat window what you discovered out of doing this short exercise and what it is that you are interested in negotiating. Like I said, there's really a wide range of things that we can negotiate, so I'd love to hear some of the things that everyone is interested in negotiating.
So we just started getting the responses. Beulah says three things. One is freedom. Second is build confidence. And third is confidently negotiate with leadership. These are
Great.
her three. And her second and third are interlinked. Build confidence and confidently negotiate with leadership. All right, waiting for more responses.
Okay.
Christine, there were some new joiners in the session, so would you just want to repeat the question for them?
Sure. So for the folks that just joined, what I had asked everyone to think about was one thing they would like to negotiate in their career. And so some questions to help think about that were, what makes you most excited about your current role, and what is one thing you would like to change, to help you think about something that you would like to be negotiating. And so you can go ahead and share in the chat what is something that you are interested in negotiating.
Okay, so Ritika says there's a new project which she will lead. So I think she's looking for more very specific on that project. Ranjana's point is working more on her own terms with clients. No, Ranjana, it's fine. You know, you don't sound non-client centric because you're wanting to do it on your terms. BG says more flexibility to choose my own goals.
Those are great things to negotiate, all of those.
Swapna's point is first is learning a new technology, to better work timings and flexibility around the same. Third is level up the next role. I think the couple of coming up on work timings. Pratima's point is also to be specific with job timings. That's a negotiation point. Anusha's is complete the goals with confidence without breaks. Margie, I don't know exactly how I'm pronouncing your name. Her points are, first is like the new challenges. Two, ability to lead in these challenges. Third, gain leadership positions. All right. Then another one from Pratima that she wants to negotiate so that she doesn't ruin her work-life balance. Malika wants to negotiate so that she's able to work on new technologies.
Okay, great.
We'll just read the last one, Tanisha's, which says, first is achieving my goals and be confident about it. Second is working on her own terms, which she loves the most. And third is at being at a leadership position, people don't take her seriously because she's very young. So
Mm,
that's a point. That's a very good point. You know how to make her heard. Yeah, nice point.
mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you all for the feedback. I appreciate it. Okay, so keeping in mind the item that you identified that you would like to negotiate, we're going to talk a little bit more about customizing your approach to negotiation so that you feel confident in asking for what you want, and really some strategies to do that. So the first one, which is really important, is do your research. You need to do your research based on what you're asking, and if it's something in your organization, has this been done before? So somebody wanted to gain more technical skills, I think they said. Perhaps this is something that you are looking for your company to help pay for further professional development. What kind of policies do they already have in place for this? What might they have done for other similar colleagues in the company? So thinking about what you want to negotiate and doing your research around a precedent in the company for this. And part of this is kind of doing your research on the people involved in the negotiation as well. So often this may be your boss, maybe it's your boss's boss or somebody different within the organization. But what is their style like? How might they respond to this? What are company policies around the things that you're asking to negotiate for? So there's a lot of factors that go into the research part, but really doing your research around that is helpful. Part of the research is also around the financial piece. Someone had mentioned that I think had their own business, knowing the value and what they could charge, or if people go into salary negotiation, that's a very common type of negotiation. So doing some research around what are going market rates for your type of role with someone with your experience in your industry. What are policies in your company around raises or promotions? Really doing that research is going to help you feel more confident as you go into the negotiation, that you have an understanding of what might be possible or what is not possible. And the same thing for the person that was an entrepreneur, doing some research around market rates for what other similar entrepreneurs to yourself charge, and that will help you to determine what may be an appropriate rate for yourself to charge your clients you're working with. The second point is about identifying obstacles, both internally and externally. And so we talked a lot about confidence and not feeling confident around negotiating. And I had mentioned early on, it's a very appropriate topic for women, because there's a lot of research that has been done around women not negotiating as much. There's a book I read a long time ago called Women Don't Ask, and it's all about actual research from some female professors around women actually not asking as much for what they want. And a lot of times this is just due to a variety of factors, but having the confidence to negotiate and ask for what you want. So part of identifying those obstacles is looking internally. Is one of the obstacles to negotiation for you your own fear of asking? And if so, why are you afraid to ask? What are you afraid could happen if you ask? Or if you ask and you are told no? And so sometimes that's what I work through with clients is, why are you afraid to ask? Like, what's the worst case scenario if you ask for this and they say no? And a lot of times, no is the worst case scenario. People are afraid of being told no, but then they continue to go on, they continue to move on in their career, and it's actually not as big of an obstacle as it seems. The other part of identifying obstacles would be external obstacles, and people, I know mentioned earlier the resistance piece. So as you're preparing for a negotiation, and this ties in with your research, really thinking about what might be some of the obstacles or barriers that the person you're negotiating with might have to negotiating on this topic. What might be common objections they might have, or objections that the organization has. And so really thinking through those and some potential talking points for yourself will be helpful as you go into the negotiation, so that you feel more confident knowing that if they come up with 3 different objections, you have thought through a response to all of those. Knowing your value. So this is really important as well. And, what is your value to your organization? Or if you're looking for a new role, what is your value as someone in your industry? Do you consistently do a good job? Do you go above and beyond in your work? Do you know that your role and the projects you're working on are valued to your organization or valued as a job seeker in the marketplace? So really taking some time to articulate your unique value will help you kind of make the case as far as negotiation. Evaluating your priorities and knowing your bottom line. So you may have multiple things that you would like to negotiate. I think a few of the people earlier in the chat, when I asked what you wanted to negotiate, had more than one thing, and that's great. But if you go into a negotiation, you need to think about what your priorities are and what is the most important thing for you to walk out of that negotiation with. You might not get all of the things you're asking for, maybe you get one of them. And so prioritizing which one of those is most important to you will be really helpful. And then, like Mahua mentioned, that bottom line, or the BATNA, which is, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So thinking about what your bottom line is, and knowing that as you go into the negotiation is really helpful. What are you willing to accept, and what are you not willing to accept? And then choosing your timing carefully. When is the best time to have this conversation? If you're in the middle of a huge project and your boss is very stressed out, probably not the best time to schedule a meeting to talk with them about this. Or just even thinking about the time of day. If your boss is better in the morning, or it's better to catch them in the afternoon, thinking about the timing of when the conversation is appropriate. And similarly, if this is, an external negotiation, if you're working with a potential client, or you're in a job search, or you're working with a vendor or something like that, when is the best time to approach them in the context of what's going on for them and what their landscape looks like. Focusing on that win-win. So really thinking of the negotiation as, how can both sides come out of this and both win? Negotiation isn't a win-lose situation. I think sometimes it can be, portrayed that way, and that's really not what it's about. It's about finding a mutually beneficial solution for both sides. So how can you focus on finding something that will make you happy, and finding something that will make the other side happy as well? And then lastly, practicing. So this is really important, and especially if you are nervous about negotiating, or you don't feel very comfortable with it, or you don't feel confident, practicing is going to help you a lot. So writing out what you want to say before you go into the negotiation is helpful. Obviously, it's going to sound a little bit different when you have that conversation than what you've written out. What you've written down will sound a little bit more scripted. You don't want to memorize it and go in and read what you've written down word for word, but having written it out and practiced it with yourself can really help as far as knowing your key points, having rehearsed those, knowing what you want to say, and not getting as nervous in the conversation. And then also practicing with someone else is really helpful. Doing a little bit of a role play there, where you can have the other person play the other side for you, and you practice the negotiation with them. And having gone through that will make you feel a lot more comfortable, and you can even give the other person some of the common objections that you think you may get, or some of the resistance, and tell them to really push back with you, so that you get the benefit of trying that practice out in a safe space and seeing how you will actually respond to those objections or the resistance ahead of time. So I will give you two examples of this. I mentioned I would give a few client examples. So I had worked with a client last year, and she was looking to take on a new role in her company. And one of the things we looked at when she was interviewing for that role was salary negotiation. And she had been working for probably about 15 years, so getting a bit closer to mid-career. And I asked her about how comfortable she was with negotiating the salary, and she said she had never negotiated her salary because she didn't feel comfortable with it, and it made her really nervous. She didn't want to come across as pushy, which can also be a common obstacle for women. And she just didn't know what to say. She felt like she didn't know what actual language and words to use in the negotiation. So we worked together on her strategy a little bit, like literally just writing out for her kind of that practice script and what she would say, and practicing it so that she felt more comfortable. And so she was able to, for the first time, negotiate her salary, which was pretty exciting, and get a little bit of an increase there over what she would have gotten without just accepting the position without the salary negotiation piece. And then the second example is from my own career. So after I had my first child, I really wanted to come back to my role and be able to work from home a few days a week. So I did a lot of research on this before I went on maternity leave, as far as and this was, several years ago when it wasn't quite as common, at least in my area of the US. Now everyone is doing it today, of course. But I did a lot of research around, what had happened in my organization, what were some of the other success stories of people doing it, what were some of the policies around it, what were just some of the trends overall. I made sure that the timing, was appropriate. So I did this kind of well ahead of my maternity leave so that my boss would have some time to think about it, and I would have some time to get an answer before I went out on maternity leave. And then keeping in mind the value piece, I had been there for quite a while, and I knew that I was a real asset to my department. And so I was in a strong position to negotiate with this. And then I practiced as well. I definitely went through, excuse me, I wrote down what I wanted to say. I practiced with a friend. And then I knew going in, what my bottom line was. So what I had asked for, I think, was to work from home 2 days a week. My boss at the time didn't feel comfortable with that, just with some different policies within the organization. But she agreed that I could do it 2 half days a week. And so for me, that was fine. It was not what I originally asked for, but I was willing to accept that. And I definitely would not have had that arrangement if I hadn't asked for it. And so that's why I think asking for what you want in your career is so important. And keeping in mind that win-win piece, right? So you may not always get exactly what you're asking for, but you might get something in the middle, and that's okay with you. So thinking through that ahead of time, and where that bottom line is for you and what you're willing to accept will be really helpful. So what I'd love to do right now is have you guys, that was a lot of content. I know that was a lot of me talking. Have you think about these different points and where you feel you need the most help or further practice on your negotiation approach. Which of these points do you need the most help or practice with? And you can put that in the chat. I don't have that on the screen for you as a question, but I'll leave these points up. Which of these points, which of these areas do you feel you need to develop further to really strengthen your negotiation skills?
All right, waiting for answers. Aditi says identification of the obstacles, which is internal and external, and knowing her value. So the second and third. BG's point is the win-win situation. It's very difficult to focus and land up onto a win-win situation in negotiation. Okay. Seema's point is evaluate priorities and know the bottom line and the timing. What is the right timing? Rashmi's pointers are the research that she needs to do before negotiating and identifying the obstacles inside and outside. Margie, her point is priorities and timing. Savita's point is identifying the obstacles. So how do you kind of get to that inner self to understand what are my obstacles? Malika's points are identifying the right timing. First of all, even evaluating what is the right timing, and then what is the win-win situation. and landing up onto it. Shruti's point was number 2, the obstacles, internal and external. So I think a lot of times internal, external obstacles are coming up. Yeah, again, Suchitra said identifying obstacles and knowing our value. And I think this resonates to your prior question when all of them responded. I think the win-win came up, knowing the value came up. Um, yeah, I think, yeah. So kind of resonates to the previous response also.
Okay, great. You know, and some strategies that I use, I presented a slightly different webinar the other day around knowing your value, was one of the key points in that, you know, but going back to some of the things that you've accomplished in your career can be helpful in identifying your value. Going to the others around you, you know, not necessarily doing a formal 360 assessment, but asking the people that know your work and that have worked with you closely, what are strengths for you, what are skill sets that you are strong in, that you're really good at, that they see. Sometimes others can see things about us that we can't see ourselves. So those are some strategies that can help with identifying your value. So I have 1 or 2 more questions for us, and then I'll leave. And then I think we have about 10 more minutes after that left in today's session. So I'll leave time for open questions as well. So what I'd invite you to think about is what's next as a result of today. I really like people to leave with something actionable from my presentations. Not just, you know, we spent an hour together and it was great, it was interesting, but, you know, what is an action you can take as a result of today? We talked about identifying one thing you wanted to negotiate, and I think most people did that. So thinking back to what was that 1 or more items that you wanted to negotiate, and then going back through the points I gave you around the strategies for negotiating and thinking about where you need to focus your efforts most moving forward on your negotiating strategy. So you've got 2 points right there. And then the last few points to think about would be how do you stay focused after today to move forward towards your goal and towards improving your negotiating skills and really making a plan for this item that you want to negotiate in your career. Who do you have around you as a support system that can help you with this? Maybe some of you have a mentor, which is great, or some of you already work with a coach, or you have a really strong, you know, professional network around you. Sometimes I talk about the concept of having a personal board of directors, you know, so just as a company has their own board of directors to guide the company, it's a great idea for anyone in their career to kind of make their own personal board of directors and have people around you that can help guide your career, and you can ask for feedback. And many of you probably already have these people who are the go-to people when you have a question that's career related. So thinking through how can you put some of the strategies in place we talked about today and who can help you with those, because a lot of times the support piece is very helpful. So thinking through those 2 items will be critical for you moving forward. So I would invite you to think about that as far as what's next after today. I'm happy to answer any questions. I mentioned 1 book in my presentation, and there's another one, and you can find me on the Star in Me and connect with me there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn as well, and I could arrange to send those 2 book titles to Mahua if people are interested in reading more on negotiation, some of the background in the research around women in negotiation, and then also just some strategies in moving forward. And then I do have a salary negotiation guide on my website. So happy to send that to people as well if they're interested. Any questions you have, you can go ahead and put in the chat. And I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes left for questions.
I think there's a good point that Meenakshi put on the chat, maybe helpful for everybody, is she says she keeps tracking her accomplishments, as a blog. So her custom practice has been to keep a running log of her accomplishments in a diary, or people can do it on Excel or various ways with date, time period that has happened, and what the situation was and what her contribution was during that time. So it's always helped her immensely when it was the actual moment of truth for the official performance review at the workplace. And now that she's a business owner, she keeps this log for herself and uses it for her own inspiration and self-reflection. And that's so true, because we miss on during the real conversations, we miss on what all things that one has accomplished if you do not keep a log of it. So very, very good suggestion. Savita's point is about the choice of timing. If I negotiate at a time in a project or task wherein I am indispensable, is it good or bad? A good question. Will it mean being seen as an opportunist, or it's all right? I should not think what the other person will think. So it's a very good question for you, Kristen.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends. Part of that goes back to knowing the people that you work with. Every organization is different and all of the people are different. And so really thinking about that and doing a bit of reflecting and research around, does it seem like they would be open to that, or does it seem like they wouldn't? And I know it's hard to say, you mentioned this, you never know what the other person's thinking, right? But if you think back over your career and different people you've worked with, some are probably more receptive to you negotiating certain things, some are probably less receptive. So thinking about the current people you work with, the current organization, if you're negotiating during the project and you're critical to the project, it's not necessarily a bad time to negotiate if the project is going really well and you're successful, right? That negotiating on kind of a high note can always be helpful, or if you've just finished the project and you've been critical in leading that and you've done a great job, that's a great time to potentially negotiate because you're in a very strong position there. And the first person's comment was very helpful as well around keeping your accomplishments. That's always something I recommend for folks to do. It's helpful when you're going into those performance reviews, or if you're in a position to update your resume, because we all forget, right? 5 years ago, do you remember specific details of projects you worked on and those accomplishments? And then when it comes time for you to negotiate, or even a year ago, you went into your performance review a full year ago, it can get hard to remember exactly what you did. So that's a really great suggestion as well.
Great. And I think there's a good point from BG saying that it's also important that negotiation has to be done with the right people and the right decision makers. There's no point wasting time negotiating with people who are not the final decision makers. So really,
yeah, that's a really great point. It's good to identify that in your research and in knowing the people you're going to negotiate with are those the right people? Can they actually make the decision?
Yeah. In fact, just to add on that point, so whenever we used to do consulting projects for a company, we used to do stakeholder analysis in the initial discovery phase. I think the same stakeholder analysis everybody should do in their own organizations, their teams, their clients. Who are the influencers? Who are going to be the influencers in the organization? Who are the ones who need more, more cajoling and more kind of time investment, and who are going to be those people who might make that chaos or noise. So you have to know how to mitigate them through the year. So I think that stakeholder analysis is an amazing tool which we apply for clients, but for our own selves to apply in our own journeys with in organization or entrepreneur, wherever, doesn't matter. It's a great tool to use. All right, more questions. Thanks, BG. Glad it helped. So I think, yeah. What other question would you have? We have some time for questions. It'll be great. We have 42 of you on the session still. It would be great if you can just ask question, because not only Christine, but within the group, I think a lot of senior women where each other can give suggestions also. So please ask questions so that the conversation keeps happening. All right, Shruti's point is, my boss didn't pay me for months and now he's negotiating on the salary.
That's an interesting one. So it sounds like she didn't get paid at all for several months. Is that the situation?
Yes.
Yeah, so sometimes, if there's a human resources department within your organization, potentially consulting them on what's occurring, especially related to salary, that if you're not actually getting your paycheck and then your boss is trying to negotiate with you related to your salary. So some of that is knowing the company policies and potentially, involving human resources when it might be appropriate if they're not actually paying you like they should be.
All right. Yeah, as you answer, sorry, Shruti's point, Pratima wants to see the summary slide, which was the one before.
Oh, I can go back to the, I think this one, is that the one they were looking for?
The one. Is this the one, Pratima? Oh no, which one does she want? The next one. Okay. Next meaning the previous one. Just try this one.
I think the other ones were more questions on them.
No, it's okay. I think, yeah, she thought she missed a summary slide, but I think we're good.
Okay.
The question was, sometimes the other person who you're talking to is quite good in negotiation. Any thoughts on how would you make yourself one step ahead of the other person and be at the leading edge?
Yeah, that's a great question. That can be challenging if you feel like the other person is a really skilled negotiator and you feel like you're not, which isn't always the truth though, right? A lot of times we're better than we think. But I would say definitely prepare yourself. If you feel like you're going into the room with somebody else who's a really skilled negotiator, read up more on negotiation. I mentioned a few books, I'll send the titles over, but there's lots and lots of articles online on negotiation. I'm sure there's podcasts. LinkedIn Learning probably has a course on negotiation. There's other places offering free courses online right now. So I would really get some more preparation and skills and perhaps education around that. Do some more reading, do some more classes so that you feel like you have more knowledge going in, and then practice, definitely practice, because you can't, you could take a course and you could read a few books and you could do all of that, but nothing makes up for actually taking some action on something and getting out there and practicing a new skill. So, find some professional friends that you could practice with, family members, other friends, but definitely practice, and that's going to help you feel more confident going into the negotiation. The other thing you can keep in mind with practice is just starting to practice negotiating on a daily basis, right? Like I mentioned, there are lots of things you can negotiate even in your personal life, and we don't always think of them as negotiations because we just kind of do them automatically, but they are. And so it's not the same necessarily as negotiating the price on something versus going into work and doing a bigger negotiation there. But start to take some small steps to practice negotiation in your daily life, and then really get some more education on it and some actual practice with friends around your specific scenario.
I just put a resource on the chat. So BG, and for everybody, there are a lot of online courses, as Christine mentioned, and Harvard University has kind of shared 67 online courses free because of COVID. In fact, we have put it on the Star and Me platform also. There is a course on mastering negotiation. I just put the link, BG, for you. You can just try out that, and there are obviously many more. But knowing Harvard and Harvard's skill only on the behavioral skills, it should be very good. So you can try it out.
Yeah, this is actually kind of a really good time if you want to do more courses or reading or education on different topics, because of COVID-19, so many places have made their online resources available for free that weren't previously. So that's one good thing, I guess, that has, come out of this if you have some extra time for professional development.
Right. Any more questions? All right, there. The last check on questions. We are at 7:04. All right, there doesn't seem to be any more questions. So thank you everybody for joining in. We will send you the feedback form just after the session. Please take, I sound like a robo now. Please take a minute's time to fill in the feedback form. It will be really, really helpful. And thank you, Christine, for taking out time and talking through such an important topic. I know this is a vast topic, but yeah, every nudge of it helps in at least taking those small actions. I think within the session, there's so many actions. I think where we all get rattled is we don't take actions. So we know there are so many things to do, but yeah, these small nudges and conversations do help us take those small steps. So thank you. Thanks a lot for spending this time with us. Do join in the Scale-a-thon group. I will send you the link, and you can share the resources of the books that you mentioned, which people can also kind of take there, and they can reach out to you from the platform. Thank
you for having me. Everyone have a great night.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Savita. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.